Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bundesliga show, brought to you by Over the Bar. Hope everyone is doing well. We are back for some more Bundesliga fantasy football. I'm joined by Rooney as ever. Rooney, how are you doing? I think you might be speaking a little bit more quietly this evening as you're on daddy daycare tonight, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Finally recovered from the illness that kept me out of last week's show. But yeah, tonight I'm looking after my daughter. My girlfriend is not at home, so my 2-year-old is asleep, and hopefully she'll keep sleeping through the show. If not, then I might have to run off at some point. But fingers crossed, she'll remain. She'll keep sleeping.
Yes. Fingers crossed for a silent night ahead. So yeah, please do smash a like on the video if you possibly can do. Comment along if you want any of your questions answered live. We shall try to get them in the time that we have this evening. I know there's been a few questions asked before the show went live, so we shall get to those as well. And of course, please do smash the red button to subscribe. If you think anyone's missing out on this fantastic content, let them know, let your friends know, let your family know, to push those subs up in the right direction as we try to hunt in on 1,000 subs. Right, just to get down to business tonight, I think obviously lots to look forward to this weekend, starting on Friday night. But what we'll do is obviously we'll get straight into the defenders that Rooney has picked, obviously with his budget, mid-price, and premium selections, all going below the screen right now, and I'll also try and keep them on screen as well for you, as you can see them a little bit more clearly. So, Rooney, I'll hand over to you for your 3 picks.
Yeah, thanks. My budget pick this week is Kilian Fischer from Wolfsburg, who I think many of us were surprised to see in the starting 11 last week for Wolfsburg. Gladbach, who was moved forward to the wing position, and Fischer was playing as right back, and he did quite well against FC Köln. Picked up 10 points, and yeah, he cost just 2.3 million, owned by 0% at the moment. So hard to go wrong with him, and yeah, he's emerged as a pretty good low price pick in defense. And my mid-price pick is Danny Da Costa, who has really seized his chance while Sylvain Wittmer was out injured, and he stayed in the starting lineup even with Wittmer back, and he had a really good game last week too against Gladbach. Scored 19 points and provided an assist, so pretty certain he will keep his place this week. So after that performance, so a pretty good option from the Mainz defense, and Anthony Kasi is a pretty good option too, playing as a left wing back. 2 players to consider there. And my premium pick is Nico Schlotterbeck, who I think has flown a bit under the radar. He's with Rafael Guerreiro performing so well. I think many people might not have noticed that Schlotterbeck has actually done quite well too. He's scored double-digit points in 3 of his last 4 games, and I think it's very unlucky not to get on the score sheet against Hoffenheim last week. And he got a lot of points from goal attempts at least, and yeah, he gets a lot of points from goal attempts every week and from won duels as well. So he's been pretty consistent as of late, and if Guerreiro doesn't start on Friday, there is a chance that he won't start with Ryerson back. Then you could just take him out and put Schlotterbeck in. They're in the same price range. So if you have a little more to spend, then Schlotterbeck is a pretty good replacement.
Yeah. Do we think Schlotterbeck's now going to be a bit of a long-term purchase for some people? I've seen that knocking around on Twitter today, actually, and he's a player that a lot of people want to invest in. Seems to be backed up by yourself as well, Rooney. So I'm looking to get him in, but obviously, does the Leipzig game put you off a little bit in the fact that he'll be quite busy, presumably at least? But Dortmund are a team in form regardless, so I guess you got to back him.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit worrying. You can't expect Dortmund to keep a clean sheet there. But then again, as I said, Schlotterbeck is picking up a point in a lot of ways, not just from clean sheets, but from won duels and goal attempts as well. So yeah, as you say, Rory, he's a very good option further down the road as a long-term pick. Of course, if you could go for Da Costa, who I just mentioned, is more of a short-term option, short-term gamble, whereas I think Schlotterbeck will perform pretty solidly going forward. And also after the Leipzig game, Dortmund have 2 pretty good fixtures coming up before the international break. So
they've got the Revier derby, of course.
Yes, Schalke and then Köln at home afterwards. So yeah, I mean, he gives you an option in defense to put your star on Friday, which is a good thing too. And then he has 2 pretty good games afterwards. So I'd say it's a pretty solid pick.
Smashing. We'll come to a few questions now as well, particularly around defenders. So first and foremost, Captain Rex checking in as always. So good evening to you, pal. Initial one from me: how much do we expect rotation for Europe in midweek to affect teams this weekend? So yeah, obviously some big matches coming up ahead for some of the sides still in European action. Rooney, obviously. Those return legs or the second legs for Bayern and Dortmund particularly that might impact some selections this weekend, do you think?
Yeah, certainly. With Dortmund, who played the first midweek game on Tuesday, we know their lineup, which is a big advantage, of course.
Sure.
But sure, we could expect to see some rotation from Bayern. So maybe it's worth sticking to the players who we know will start or who we are pretty sure will start if we're looking at that game. And also we have some Europa League games coming up. Could influence the likes of Union Berlin, for example, their wing-back situation that is completely impossible to figure out. So yeah, sure, there are some players that I would avoid, but also some that I would feel pretty certain about playing both in the week, this weekend and in midweek.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, the Europa matches will at least be the first legs of that next round. So naturally, Dortmund and Bayern are involved in matches that are obviously incredibly tight still, and that they need to win. So they can't afford to risk their first team players not being played in that match. So yeah, obviously we'll have to see. And the advantage of Dortmund, as you say, Rooney has been able to see that lineup on Friday evening. Another question in regards to defence, and this one I've seen knocking around as well, in regards to do we think Cancelo will play? And that's from Jonna. So welcome to the show, Jonna. Not seen your name on there before, so thanks very much for the question. And Rooney, do we think Cancelo will play?
No, it doesn't look like he will play. I don't feel certain enough about him playing to keep him personally. I'm looking to sell him because Bayern played a very good game against Union last time without him. So I think Nagelsmann will probably largely stick with the same starting 11. Of course, they have Upamecano coming back, which is not a plus for Cancelo either. So. So no, I don't think so.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the next comment from Jonna was in regards to Schlotterbeck, because I think that came in whilst we were talking about him. Jonna, if you want a follow-up on that, or if it's in regards to Cancelo, just let us know in the comments and we'll follow up with that. And next question in from Captain Rex is in around the Bayern front line. So we'll come to that when we get onto the strikers. So we'll move on now to our midfielders, Rooney. So let's get them going below screen right now. I'll leave you to crack on with your budget pick to start with, which very interesting one indeed. But the player had a particularly good game against my boys, in fairness. And I shall make sure that all the questions are answered after that. So over to you.
Yeah, my budget pick is Rodrigo Salazar. I think he was all over the place in Schalke's win over Stuttgart. Provided an assist and picked up 17 points. So pretty impressive stuff for a player in that price range. And despite being bottom of the table, Schalke are actually in fairly good form, I guess you could say. They haven't lost in the last 5 games at least, and they're coming off a win against Stuttgart. And it's looking it's Bochum are in a very different situation. They're really out of form, and it's not a good time for them to play this relegation 6-pointer. Will be a very important game for both sides, and a game that neither side can probably afford to lose. So Salazar could be a key player again, I think, for Schalke. They're certainly the most informed team of the two. And yeah, then my mid-price pick, who I didn't get last week, I opted for Jonas Hoffman because I thought that was the safe choice. But yeah, of course, I should have gone with Jae-Sung Lee. Also mentioned him last week, and he continued his red-hot form against Gladbach. Scored and provided an assist in Mainz. Pretty impressive, pretty comfortable 4-0 victory. So so he's in great form. He's found the net 5 times and set up 2 goals in his last 5 Bundesliga games. So with Mainz facing the league's most out of form side, Hoffenheim at home this time, I think he's a pretty good shout. And Mainz are actually one of the team who also have a pretty good fixture next time. They have Hertha, so that's not too bad. So you could keep the likes of Lee or Da Costa or Kasi or whatever for those 2 games.
Yeah.
It might not be just this game alone. And then finally, Florian Wirtz is my premium pick because he just impresses me every time he's on the pitch. The problem is that he's not starting every week with the Europa League going on too. But this time, I feel after coming off the bench against Freiburg, I'm pretty sure he will start this time. Also because, with all due respect to Ferencváros, who Leverkusen will play in the Europa League, it's not the most difficult opponent. And they're playing them at home on Thursday. So I think Alonso will probably opt to let Wirtz start this one. And I fully expect Leverkusen to beat Hertha. They're quite huge favorites for this one. Hertha are really poor away from home. They've lost every away game since mid-September. So if they struggle again away from home, I think Wirtz will probably be involved in a goal or 2 for the home side.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a few of those teams that really struggle on the road. Hertha, one of them. But obviously the Bochum Schalke game, Salazar strikes me as a good pick, but Bochum are certainly stronger at home, aren't they, Runa, than they are away from home. They are pretty terrible on the road, but their home form is something that maybe makes me think it could be a good way for them to get something from that match. It will be interesting to see. So let's come to some of the questions that are in the chat now. So from Jeff Wagner. So evening, Jeff. Hope you're doing well. First question in from you is: would you consider dropping either Brandt or Royce in order to add Jae-Sung Lee? So obviously, tricky matchup for Dortmund, and obviously the interesting option, which you've already alluded to, Runa, sounds like fairly sound reasoning from Jeff.
Yeah, I'm in a similar situation. Only I have Bellingham and Royce in my team, and I think having 2 Dortmund midfielders this week is probably one too many. So yeah, I think I feel comfortable enough about Lee and Mainz this week to make that change. Could be a pretty difficult game for Dortmund, and Lee has a much better matchup and is in great form too. So that's certainly an option that makes sense, I think.
Yeah, I'm almost erring on the side of getting rid of any Leipzig or Dortmund options just so I can enjoy the game for what it is. But I might have to reason on the side of certainly bringing in Schlotterbeck at the very least. Next question from Jeff, again, kind of relating to what we've already talked about. Cost difference aside, who would you prioritize between Lee and Wirtz? I mean, from player profile and what they can actually do, you'd naturally say Wirtz, I guess, but Lee is in some seriously hot form, isn't he, Runa?
Yeah, it's actually a bit of a tough one, but I would really like Wirtz for for the early Sunday standalone fixture. To be able to start him there could be pretty important, I think, especially if if Lee, for example, doesn't deliver. I'm thinking about getting them both. But I'd probably go with Wirtz. I think Leverkusen are bigger favorites too. Wirtz is more influential and just a better player. So they're both good options, but Wirtz for me there.
Yeah, I think I would concur with that one. Another midfielder-related question from Jonna. Is it worth keeping Hoffman? At home, he often scores, but Gladbach are terribly inconsistent. You couldn't be more right with that statement, Jonna. They haven't won back-to-back Bundesliga games. We were talking about this on Tuesday, actually, when reviewing the last match week. Mainz had them on toast, as did Hertha. They beat Bayern, but I guess with stipulations involved. So, yeah, I mean, is it worth keeping him? You know, he does score goals, but the side are not playing well.
Yeah, tough one. Yeah, I think he's worth keeping because Hoffman is a player that can just explode against any opponent, as we've seen a number of times. I've owned him at all the wrong times this season. He didn't do anything in the easy fixtures they had a few games ago, and then he exploded against Bayern, and I brought him back in for the Mainz game, and he didn't deliver there. So kind of hard to predict with Hoffman, but yeah, I'd say he's worth keeping because he is a player who can be a real difference maker when he's on his game, and I don't think it's impossible that Gladbach can win that game. They're just so inconsistent, as you say, Roy. So who knows?
Yeah, absolutely impossible to tell what's coming next from Gladbach. Absolutely. Very much related to that question from Jay. So good evening, Jay. Thanks very much for this question. I have Hoffman and Grifo. Which one to drop? Another tricky one, which I'll gladly pass on to you, Runa, because Grifo from set pieces is just delicious to watch. He's so dangerous. In that
situation, I would drop Hoffman because I mean Gladbach are coming off a 4-0 defeat. Grifo is involved in everything Freiburg do offensively, and besides, Freiburg have a better matchday 24 fixture against Hoffenheim at home that I would surely want Grifo for. Whereas Gladbach are playing Leipzig away from home next time, so that's actually a pretty difficult one for Hoffman there. So, definitely keeping Grifo out of the two.
Yeah, pretty much summarised there. Quick R in the comments saying Hoffman is either 20 points or 0. Pretty much mirroring what you said there, Runa. He does have the ability to explode in these matches, doesn't he? But sometimes he can leave you thinking, why did I keep him in the team? Just double checking that I haven't missed any midfielder ones. So there's probably one more here that we'll come to before we move on to the strikers, and then we must go through the questions asked before the show as well, particularly from Jay on Twitter. So we'll make sure that we'll get to those questions for him. But first, Captain Rex has asked, is Szoboszlai the midfielder to rotate for a differential, such as Lee this week? I fancy him not to do as well as many as my Dortmund midfielders. And we haven't seen the best of Szoboszlai, I would say, in these big matches, Runa. He has come and scored some good points recently, and is a good fantasy player to have. But maybe with the returning Nkunku as well, is he someone maybe to rotate out?
Yeah, I'd say so. I would certainly drop Szoboszlai before the Dortmund midfielders. And also, as you say, Roy, that's a good point. Maybe you would drop him anyway next week if you're getting Nkunku in there, or whenever you're getting Nkunku in. So sure, it makes sense to take him out this week.
Fantastic stuff. Just making sure that there's not been any extra I think there's some chat about Nkunku, so we'll come to him. Although, does Nkunku count as a midfielder in the game, Runa?
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
He does. All right. Well, we'll talk about Nkunku anyway then, because there have been a few questions about him. Quick R has commented about him. So is Nkunku back? And there was another one about him a bit earlier on, but I think I may have lost it now in the chat. But there's certainly some interest around him. So when do we think he's going to be back firing? Basically, Runa, I think that was one of the comments that it was. When are we going to see him back at his best?
Yeah, that's difficult to say. Probably after the international break. But I mean, even when he's on 70 or 80%, he's still an amazing player who can still make a difference, as we saw when he came on and provided an assist a few weeks ago. So looks like he's back, and he looks like he'll start this time. He got a lot of praise from Marco Rose at today's press conference. He said he's done well in training, and it's going in the right direction for him. So I actually expect him to start, but I think it's probably a week too early to put him in because of the fixture they have away against Dortmund, against this informed Dortmund side. I think that it's probably worth waiting and seeing what happens this time, and then maybe considering bringing him in for the Gladbach game on match day 24, depending on how he performs this time.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Looks like there's about 29% of people who have put that risk on selecting him. So time will indeed tell, but I think we're best off listening to what Rooney has to say there. Absolutely. So we shall move on to the strikers then. And so, Runa, we've got your 3 picks going along the screen there. So let's get to them, and then we'll finish off with questions at the end.
Yeah, my budget pick is Kevin Behrens from Union Berlin, who is, I think he had an excellent start to the year, but he's had a bit of a dip in form. He's failed to get on the score sheet in his last 3 Bundesliga games. Nevertheless, I think that could change. Union are very good at home, and they're playing an out of form Köln side this time. So I really back Union to win that game, and Behrens looks like he will start up front. It's pretty cheap, and he's owned by 0%, so has a lot of differential potential. And I think with what he's shown this year so far, he has the backing of Urs Fischer, deservedly so. He's scored some important goals for them this year. So yeah, maybe that's the game for him to bounce back. And then my mid-price pick is Ludovic Ajorc, who, I think he should take a lot of confidence from his performance against Gladbach last Friday. He scored his first goal, and he's owned by 0% too. So could be a very good differential this week too, given Mainz's really attractive match at home against Hoffenheim. So maybe good option there too in that price range. And then finally, Thomas Muller is back. He's been in pretty good form fantasy-wise recently. If you look at the last 4 match days, he's been the 3rd best performing forward in the game with 33 points to his name. And obviously also had a good game against Union Berlin. Earned some praise from Nagelsmann, who said that he's planning to stick with him in the starting lineup going forward in the weeks to come. And getting that knowledge is pretty good, considering the rotation up front for Bayern. The fact that we know that Müller is likely to play, of course, increases his value. And that coupled with his good form makes him a pretty good option. I think he's also his ownership is down to 3%, I think. So
3%. Yeah.
So a really good alternative to some of the more popular Bayern assets up front, I think.
Yeah, I've stuck him straight into my team, especially as I'm expecting him to punish my boys on Saturday evening. Never write him off. I think a lot of people say that. Peter was saying that on Tuesday's show as well, of course. So yes, Thomas Muller is certainly one to keep an eye out for. Righty ho. So just making sure that we come to all striker questions. I think there was one a little bit earlier on. So yeah, Captain Rex asked earlier, which options are best way into the Bayern front line this week? Musiala? Question mark.
Yes, I still think Choupo-Moting is the best way into the Bayern front line because he's cheap and he plays up front as a traditional number 9, and his ownership is low too. So what's not to like?
Yeah.
But yeah, besides him, I think Musiala, of course, is probably the best option. And doubling up on Bayern this week could be an option with Musiala and Choupo, or Choupo and Muller, or whatever. Choupo, Musiala, and Muller are the 3 Bayern forwards that I'd consider at the moment.
Yeah, I've gone Chupo and Muller so far, and need to make a decision on my third striker. So yeah, any more striker questions? Whilst we've just got a minute, please do put them in the comments. Just coming to the ones that were asked before the show went live from Jay. So FBL Gunnosaurus. So the first of which was, with most of Bayern's attackers now available this match week, with will Nagelsmann turn into Urs Fischer as with his fullbacks, and will his forward line be a guessing game? Which forwards do you expect to keep their spot for match day 22 lineup? So I think we've kind of covered that, haven't we, Rooney, in regards to the strikers and the front line that Bayern are going to be using. Muller looks like he's getting the nod. Chupo, of course, as well, and then Musiala. I think Sane might be a question mark potentially. So, yeah. Okay, grand. The next of which from Jay was few fixture clashes for the top midfielders this match day, with BVB versus RDL and Borussia Mönchengladbach versus Freiburg. A lot of us will own 4 or 5 like Brandt, Royce, Bellingham, Szoboszlai, and Kunku, Hoffman, and Grifo. Who's worth keeping and who's worth ditching this match day? Again, I think we've covered this for you, Jay, a little bit earlier on when we were talking about the midfielders. Yeah. So Rooney just nicely summarised that you think that Dortmund midfielders over Szoboszlai, so probably taking out Szoboszlai and then probably taking out Hoffman and keeping Grifo.
Yeah, if I have to decide between the two, but for me it's not a problem to have both Hoffman and Grifo because they're both so influential.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fine. So hopefully that answers that one for you, Jay. And then the final one in from Jay was, at the moment, would it be optimal to own both Cancelo and Alphonso Davies with at least one of them always starting? Thoughts on doubling up despite the premium prices, if you can afford it, and the rotation risks? Seems impossible to know, even with the predicted lineups, who will start. So doubling up time on Bayern again, or is it too much of a risk?
Nah, at the moment, I actually think there is like a tendency. Davies seems like a pretty nailed-on starter for the time being, whereas Cancelo is benched at the moment. So for me, owning Davies, I feel pretty confident about him starting. I wouldn't feel that way about Cancelo. So I think at the moment for me, it's just selling Cancelo and keeping Davies, and then wait and see what happens. If that situation changes suddenly, then make a change. But I feel certain enough about Davies to just own him and not have Cancelo too as a backup.
Sure. It's funny because a few weeks ago, or even a month ago, roughly speaking, we were kind of talking about how Alphonso Davies' place was at risk because of the way that Bayern were lining up and that Kingsley Coman was doing a fine job at wing back. So it just goes to show that things can swing around very quickly. So Cancelo could very easily be back in favour, in the defensive line quite soon. So just a couple more questions from Captain Rex, and then we'll probably call it a night. So very quickly, first one in from Captain Rex. Gunter on sale or Davies? I was tempted by Gunter, I must admit, seeing that he was on sale. So interesting question that.
Yeah, Davies. I think I trust him more to do well. I don't think Gunter has been as good this season, or at least not in recent months as he's been in the past, fantasy-wise at least, whereas Davies is likely to play in a very attacking role for Bayern against Stuttgart. So yeah, Davies.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one last one that we'll come to from Captain Rex. So, do we know why some weeks Gnabry or Sane suddenly have these predicted big scores? It seems quite random to me, but clearly is very accurate. Just wondering what your thoughts on that are. And there's been a lot of chat about Gnabry and Sane's futures at the club and their Rooney. So it does seem that they do come up with these performances, almost like a bit like Hoffman that we've talked about. They can be, getting these really low scores, and then all of a sudden they'll come in with a really good brace and the assists or something like that. So, any thoughts on it? Is it just maybe the players are slightly inconsistent, or the way that they may be rotated out every so often?
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing for Bayern and you're Serge Gnabry or Leroy Sané and you're dominating a game and you have all those players around you, then of course you can have games where it's just you that's scoring the goals, that is picking up the points. At the same time, I feel like both players are under pressure to perform at the moment. So whenever they're given the chance, then they need to show that they deserve to start and that they're good enough. Basically, that's what you need to do week in, week out, especially at Bayern. So I'll probably steer clear of them at the moment, but we all know that they have a lot of quality. So whenever they come onto the pitch, then they always have a chance of doing well, a pretty good chance too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much it then. We've got through as many questions as we possibly could in the allotted time that we like to give. So thank you to everyone who's commented tonight, got involved. Questions have been brilliant, and even people asking questions before the show as well. Absolutely fantastic that everyone's enjoying what we're doing with fantasy football. Really hope that everyone has a good and productive match weekend ahead. So thank you to everyone who's watching. Thank you to Rooney as per usual, and well done to your daughter for sleeping all the way through to allow us to have you for the allotted time, which is fantastic. So all there is very briefly to say is please make sure that you smash a like on the video for Rooney's commitment, for the very least. Comment subsequently if you haven't caught this video live, and we'll try to come to that as well. And subscribe to the channel, and make sure you get over to Over the Bar FB and Bully News on Twitter to make sure that you don't miss out on all great Bundesliga football articles and transfer gossip and fancy tips, everything else like that on those sites. So thank you, everyone, and we shall catch you next time.
Bye.